All right. So the first game of Pochettino's first Camp Cupcake ends in a 3-1 win to the U.S. over Venezuela. And it played out pretty much exactly as I thought, right? It played out pretty much as we expected. I expected even this U.S. team to beat this Venezuela team because it was mostly their domestic league players. And I expected nobody to really stand out in a way that you go, oh, hey, this is a guy that could contribute to the actual U.S. men's national team. And so did we learn anything? Not really. Most things that we saw today, we kind of already knew. At least I kind of already knew. Here's going to be an interesting one. Matko, not impressive. 2 goal contributions. I was working, so I didn't see the game, but saw the stats. So let me explain. Yes, he did score a nice goal for sure in the second half. The assist to Agyemang did most of the work. Well, the goalkeeper did a lot of the work too, but Agyemang did most of the work on that. He passed it to him in midfield and he ran up and scored. So I wouldn't really be impressed by that assist. I'll talk about this with Tack. How you doing, man? But like performances, I said this before the game, and I said this on Twitter as well. The very bare minimum that any of these guys needed to do in a game against this very poor team was to look absolutely incredible. Did anybody look absolutely incredible today?
No. Just to add to that so people can understand it from the get-go what we mean. For example, if putting levels aside, I'm not even going to mention like Messi or Ronaldo or Neymar. If the United States back in the 2000s faced Argentina and Juan Riquelme was playing as the 10, you would see him play and you're just like, whoa, this guy from a technical standpoint, he just levels above everyone, right? You just see it. This game where we were facing mediocre opponents, no one really stood out like that. There were a few guys that did fine, played well, like McGlynn played well. We'll talk about a few, but no one that you were watching this game was like, holy crap, that guy's way above. Esmir Bajcetic last year, he actually looked levels above everyone when he played, which was kind of surprising. Yeah. Nevertheless, he's with PSV now.
Bosnia, sadly.
It's funny because we kept saying that after that camp. It was like, this is a talent right there.
Yeah.
And then 1 year later, the guy went to PSV. And he's with Bosnia, even I think starting for them. So that's the point we're trying to make. It's like no one really. There's a few that looked bad, but most players didn't really look bad. They looked fine.
They looked fine or even good.
Yeah,
like I would say, McGlynn looked good for the most part. But again, looking good against this level of opposition does not mean that you are now ready to contribute to the senior team. We also have to think about depth and options that are way ahead of these guys, right? And that's something a guy like Jack McGlynn, to be very honest, although I thought he had a mostly good game today, capped off with a really nice goal, he still struggles in certain aspects of his game. He wasn't tested in the aspects of that in this game, in those aspects, particularly under pressure. That's where he struggles sometimes. But he's got a sweet left foot. You give him any kind of time and space, that left foot can create magic. What McGlynn needs to do is he needs to go to Europe somewhere, probably the Eredivisie, continue to develop as a player, get used to high-intensity pressing, and get used to playing quickly under pressure. If he can improve that aspect of his game, then he might be a contributor in the future. But let's be honest, his spot right now, there's a lot of competition. Reina, Tillman, McKennie, Musa, Adams, Johnny, Tessman, Maloney, Aiden Morris, Luca De La Torre, Paxton. There's like 10 or 11 guys that can play in midfield. And so he doesn't really have the chance to break in because he's not as good as those guys right now, right? So, but we knew this. When we saw this roster, there is nobody on this roster that I thought that's a guy I think can contribute to the senior team. We talked about this ad nauseum in Tax Stream, but this is just an MLS promotion tour. You have to call guys in, they have to play. Most of them are at the level that they're at. Some of them managed to look bad, for example. Miles Robinson, the goal was on him. Partly a little bit on Schulte too, I'll be honest. I think Schulte could have done better on the goal. But mostly it's on Miles Robinson. And I'm going to be a lot harsher on Miles Robinson than, everybody else, because this guy's been with the senior team since Greg Berhalter fell in love with him in 2019. So he's 5 years with the senior team. Shouldn't you look like the best player on the field, the most accomplished, the most experienced, the least likely to make an error and switch off on a set piece and give up a goal? No, you should, but he didn't. right? Shaq Moore, the less said about him, the better. Can't defend to save his life, despite what Brian McBride wants you to think. But this is stuff we already know. That's what's frustrating about this camp, Tack, is we learn nothing except that players who are mid or bad are still mid or bad. Like, that's kind of the takeaway from this camp. And Nelly was supposed to be this incredible Tyler Adams-esque player. Sure, he only had half an hour. I saw nothing of what people were talking about. Nothing. I saw a very midfielder. Agyemang scored a nice goal. I personally think he hit that trade at the keeper and he got a little bit lucky, but the run was nice. But he couldn't hold up the ball to save his life. So he's a big athlete and he runs, but this guy has very little technical ability. I'm sorry, very little. And so I'm not going to jump on the Agyemang hype train.
Well, he doesn't even look better than Brendan Vasquez and Jesus Ferreira, that we often say that they're not at the standard for the national team right now with Balogun, Pepe, Sargent. There's options. And to me, Vasquez and Ferreira are way ahead of this guy. They look much better. So, yeah, it's one of those where we want to say this again. Like, if you want to just sit back, relax, enjoy the camp, like, we're not taking that from you. You should enjoy it. If you enjoy, just sit back, have a beer, enjoy soccer. It's not quality soccer, but you can still enjoy the game. But the problem is when people start to read into this and try to push narratives and agendas for certain players to get a shot. Like, they just say, just give them a shot. It's like, no, like, we're seeing it right now. They're mostly not good enough. And then you mentioned McGlynn. He was one of the guys that looked good. McGlynn's biggest issue today to make the national team is the excessive depth that we have in the midfield.
Right.
He's not a bad player, and he showed today he's good. There's a few concerns with his game, ability in tight spaces, speed, but he's a very technical player. Great left foot. Almost scored a second banger in the game.
Yeah.
But again, the midfield, when you look at the options, you just don't see where you can squeeze McGlynn in.
Yeah.
So, and then when you look at all the other players that we had in this team, outside of the goalkeeper, mainly because we have no depth in that position, there's no one really to make the roster for an A squad in March.
Yeah.
No one.
Nobody should be there. And frankly, the ones who will be there, which is Miles and probably Schulte.
Maybe.
I mean, here's the problem. Here's the only thing Miles has going for him. Trusty and Cameron Carter-Vickers have not been great in Scotland. So even if you call up, let's say, I mean, I still think they should get called up regardless. But let's say you call up Chris Richards and Mark McKenzie. For me, those should be two roster locks. Probably still Ream at this point, although we should be trying to move on from Ream ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the fourth guy you bring? The fourth. Let's say you only bring 4 center backs.
I would probably go for Trusty or Carter Vickers. I still wouldn't call up Noah Kai Banks yet, unless he was starting in the Bundesliga and holding his own consistently. But I'd probably go with Trusty or Carter Vickers. I don't think Miles.
I probably would too. I'm just saying the only reason that Miles continues to be involved. Well, actually, he was called up because CCV was injured in the last 2 camps.
Mm-hmm.
Put Weston McKennie at center back before Miles. Like, I'm sorry, there's Musa.
Tyler Adams would make one heck of a
Joe Scally alone. Like
Tessman.
Tanner Tessman, for example, Leonard Maloney. Like, there are so many options. If you ever get to 6th center back, there are so many better options than Miles. This guy has been like frauding it out to this day. And still, like, this is the same thing we saw even under Pochettino now, right? Just 2 different games under Pochettino where he played against Mexico, was terrible, was responsible for one of the goals, bad in the air. And then again today, giving up a silly goal in the air that he shouldn't be giving away. Why is he still there? Shaq Moore, I'll be straight with you. The only reason Shaq Moore is here is because all of our right backs are in Europe. And Nathan Harriel was not released, and John Tolkien was sent to Holstein Kiel. So now Arfiston had to play left back, even though he plays right back for Columbus, or right wing back. So who else are you going to start at right back? Shaq Moore. He showed us once again he can't play. It's one of those situations where people say, "Oh, you're being too negative," or you guys. I want to talk about this in the stream too. This camp should be an under 23, under 20 camp. If we have to do it because of the dumb TV contracts, let's at least bring in the young players and give them a taste of the international game. Not use it as an opportunity to hand out undeserved caps to very poor players, right?
I was going to say one thing because people are going to bring up that we're currently having a U20 camp, which is true. But there's a difference between a U20 camp that we can have multiple throughout the years throughout the year without
Yeah.
Pochettino, but this one can be one with Pochettino, with the coach
You don't
involved.
need to have a U20 camp if some of them are with
Exactly. And then
Pochettino. It
the
has more
U20
value.
coach, can just be with Pochettino in that camp,
Yes.
learning
Yeah.
and seeing, and these players will get that experience with Poch. And then we have other U20 camps where they're going to be just with the coach when Pochettino's busy with the senior team. Like, the criticism of this camp is not to hate on this camp or hate on MLS or even to say to end it. It's more that we have to take certain measures to make it useful instead of being, let's just be here because we got to fulfill a TV contract. No,
Right.
it is possible to make it useful, but you have to take the right steps. Right now, we're not doing that. We're literally just doing it because you have to, like what Jurgen Klinsmann was saying, right? Just you need to fulfill the TV contract. But again, it's you can make it useful, and we should make it useful, but we're choosing not to. That's where the criticism comes from, and it makes the whole camp a joke. Cubo Maker saying Luna is on another level to these kids. I didn't see him on another level. I do think he deserved to start, and I think Diego Luna played like 30 minutes, something like that. He didn't get many minutes. There were a few players when Pete's back here. I don't know where Pete went now, that we're going to be talking about that did look good. Diego Luna always looks good on the ball. He's a very technical player. I don't think he's on another level compared to a few guys. I don't think he's levels above Jack McGlynn. He didn't look like he was so dominant when he was in.
No, I think he deserves more chances, and I would like to see him start against, Costa Rica. And I thought he was impressive when he came on, but he didn't look like, oh my God, what a standout. And I like Luna. I think he's a good player. I think he had a good MLS year. I think, frankly, Luna should probably leave MLS, hopefully this summer, and try to go to Eredivisie or somewhere else so that he can continue to develop, because he is a technical player. Right? He's a technical player. He moves very quickly. That's the one thing I do like about him, is he doesn't need a lot of time and space. Watch how many times in that last 30 minutes he received the ball and then quickly one-touched it under a lot of pressure, but one-touch it to the next guy. Or, he doesn't need a lot of time and space to settle the ball and do something with it. Right? So that was impressive, but I don't think it was like, oh my God, this guy is next level either. No, I think he needs to push himself and probably leave MLS. Let's see what he ends up doing. But even with Luna, how many guys are there at the 10? You got Gio Reyna, you got Malik Tillman, Brendan Aronson plays there, Paxton Aronson plays there. That's 4 right off the top of my head that can play the 10. To be frank, Weston McKennie can play the 10 too quite well. So that's 5 guys that can play the 10. Luna just has a lot of competition in front of him, but he definitely needs to keep pushing himself. It doesn't help that, Argentine Newell's old boys Matko Miljevic is getting chances ahead of him, because it feels a little unfair.
Now he's at Huracan, apparently.
Now he's at Huracan. So maybe no more call-up.
He spit on someone. And
that's a very, very weird call-up. I'm trying to think. Clark was fine to decent, not great, but not awful. Guti had some nice flashes of moments. Those guys are young, not super young. They're not teenagers. They're in their early 20s, right? So hopefully they can continue to develop. But I don't see, with any of them, I don't see anything that's like, this guy's a contributor at a high level one day. I don't, Unfortunately for Guti, he's going to be playing under Greg Berhalter now for the rest of the year. So that's probably not going to be the best for his development. It is what it is. Brian White got chances. Indiana Vasilev got chance. You're 30-year-old MLS journeyman. You're just getting chances to say you got national team caps. I don't understand it. And some people say, I want to address this, because some people will say, we don't need to hate on it. We can just let it be what it is. And I think you had a really good sort of response to that of like, no, I think that is a mediocre mindset, right? You're basically saying this opportunity to improve, to develop the next generation, to have Poch get eyes on some of these younger players is should not be taken as such. We should just hand out caps, right? So no, I disagree strongly. I think this is something where we have to use this camp for what it is. Since we have to have it, it's in the TV contracts. We might as well use it as an opportunity to take a look at the young guys, right? And it creates this culture of mediocrity and participation trophy mindset when Shaquille Moore is still getting caps in 2025 because we're not allowed to call in the 6 other guys in Europe because it's a fake camp, right? Like, it's not good. American soccer culture is still so rampant with these participation trophy mindsets, and it takes a long time to get over that, partially because the mainstream media also helps perpetuate that. And then when you say, oh, it's fine, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. It does matter because merit matters.
I also think that if they sold this camp as the next generation camp, it's like, hey, it's only U22 players, U20 players, the
Yes.
next generation, more people would watch because, like, okay, let's see.
Exciting.
Because, for example, our U20s are playing right now, and how do we even watch the games? Right?
No,
It's not on
can't
TV.
watch them.
It could be like a next generation camp where people are just watching U20 players. They're getting some reps under Pochettino, the senior team coach. But again, it's just there's not much more to say about this camp besides that. Nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you had Diego coaching in goal, if you had a back line where maybe Winder was playing, or maybe not Winder, but maybe DeToni was playing, Peyton Miller was at left back, Reed Baker-Whitting was at right back. If you had Pedro Soma, I'm sure these clubs, these guys who are in the club academies, they would and have in the past released him. Like Uli Yanez got released by Wolfsburg when he was in their academy, right? If Julian Hall was called up, for example, to play with the senior team, you could even bring a guy like Kevin Sullivan. And even if he's not ready to start, he could still be a part of this camp. Just bring in Maxi Carrizo, right? These are kids that you think, okay, at least they have maybe they have a future. Why not call them in now and just give them an opportunity to get a look at them, right? To me, that is a much better use of this camp than that. And also much more exciting because more people are going to watch. And you're exactly right. Take it as a futures camp. That's what Emma is doing with the women. Emma Hayes.
I want to address just one thing that James Warden, and James, no hate on your comment, but let me just address it why I highly disagree with you. You're saying it's boring to just shit on this over and over again. Until they fix it and the camp becomes useful, there is absolutely no honest dialogue that we can have about this camp besides shitting on it.
Right. What do you want us to say, James? Do you want us to say this is a good camp?
There's nothing to say. There's nothing to say. And the problem with the camp is like people will go and say something like, but we can't cut it off. We need the TV contract. Sure. What we're saying is, since it's here to stay, how do we make it useful for the program over the short and long term? That's the discussion we're having. And the reason the discussion is more negative is because none of that or most of that is not being done. It's not any of that. I made a whole video talking about that. And at the end, we did come to the conclusion of the video that the camp doesn't need to cease to exist. It can continue to exist. But if you don't change it, it's completely useless. And for the program, I mean, if you enjoy the game, good for you. If that's the point of the camp, just to entertain a few people, it might have entertained a few people. But for the program, there's only one take from this camp. It is useless.
Yeah, that's in its current usage. Samuel, this is it. Would any of these players make a 2026 World Cup? You are a year and a half away. I mean, Miles, he shouldn't, but depending on how Poch reviews Miles, maybe. Schulte could probably be in the three goalkeepers. He might be. We don't know. Could be Horvath. Could be Cochin. We'll see. But he could be there. But other than that, can you, honestly, Samuel, can you see anybody? Can you see anybody making this World Cup? And over who? Can you tack? Is there anybody there that you look at and go,
I can see Schulte making the roster. I don't think he'll start, but I can. Yeah. I don't think Miles should be in the roster, but there is a world where he could make the roster. And there's also a possibility of Tim Ream being there, even though Ream has definitely declined quite a bit, and it's still 18 months away, so he'll decline even more. Outside of those players, I'm trying to think here. I don't think there's any other player that has like I'm not going to say it's impossible, but none of them have a realistic chance of making
Most of them are fourth or fifth on the depth chart in their position anyways.
I think more. I think
some more, further. Some 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. Like, let me ask you this here. Let me ask you this. If we brought a B team to the Gold Cup, which, remember, the B team has some players in Europe. Remember that? Some in Europe and MLS. If we brought a B team to the Gold Cup, how many of these guys would start? I think that's the better question. So Schulte could. Miles,
so wait, when you say B team, you mean a B11 or a B roster?
A B roster.
Okay, so you're taking the top 26 are out.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have a B roster.
For example, a player, let's say like Sargent is not making the roster with Pepe and Balogun. Sargent could be in that one. Or Taylor Booth could be an option. Noah Kai Banks if he's playing
Well,
more in the
let's
Bundesliga.
go through the positions. I think this is an interesting exercise. If we exclude our 3 best goalkeepers, let's say it's Horvath, Kochin, and Turner, let's say.
Okay.
Right?
So
Schulte
Schulte.
could.
Yeah.
Right? Honestly, the right backs, it's probably Marlon Fossey and Brian Reynolds. Because after Joe Scally and Serginho Dest, it's those 2.
Yeah.
After that, it's probably Richie Ledesma.
And then left back, you would have maybe like Lund or Token.
Right. Because if A-Rob and one of the 3, Wiley, Lund, or Token were there, so none of these left backs would be there.
Yes.
Then you talk about center backs. Center backs, honestly, because we're so weak at center back, Miles and Ream would probably make that. Because if you take, let's say you take Richards, Trusty, CCV, and McKenzie out as the top 4 center backs. Now you've got Miles, Ream, probably, right?
And then probably George Campbell and Zimmerman, whatever, something like that. The center backs could.
Sure.
And then fullbacks, we established that none would. Midfield, Leonard Maloney's not making our roster. He would on the B1. Busio and Tessman in a fully fit roster, one of them doesn't make it.
Right.
So Busio or Tessman. Luca De La Torre that just came to
Aiden Morris doesn't either. So he's there.
Aiden Morris. Luca De La Torre that just came back to MLS probably makes it too. Luca De La Torre. Honestly, when you look at MLS, the players that are not there, Jesus Ferreira makes the roster. Brendan Vasquez makes the roster. He was not. They were both not there.
Aronson in midfield as well.
Paxton Aronson. So if we did a B team, a lot of these players, most of them don't make it.
Yeah.
There you go. So how many can make it to the A team in the World Cup? Pretty much none. Almost none. None. Almost. Yeah.
People are forgetting that y'all would constantly criticize Triple G for the same reason. And guess what? You/we were right. Yeah. I don't even think we were geniuses for that. Right. It was just very obvious how awful Triple G was. And people said the same thing about us. You're getting boring. Well, what did you want us to say? He's still here making the same mistakes, doing the same dumb things again, Well,
also fair is fair, right, Pete? If Pochettino did something similar to Berhalter, which he kind of did this camp, we're going to criticize. We're not targeting Berhalter. If Pochettino does something like Matko Miljevic starting, for example, without deserving, he's going to be held accountable for that. We can't play favorites here. We forgot also Zendejas would make the roster, the B roster. Zendejas. Honestly, Kate Cow is better than a lot of these players too. Kate Cow would make the roster. So, guys, the truth is for 2026, pretty much none of these guys make it outside of the goalkeeper and maybe 1 or 2 center backs. Maybe.
Steven Spada. Honestly, at 30, if you're not world class, you should be thinking about moving into leadership / management or media. Give opportunities to both. So, Steven, players nowadays can play beyond 30. Are you talking about the national team or are you talking about clubs? Because it used to be that once you hit your early to mid 30s, your career was winding down. But mostly because of like sports science and the way that players take care of their bodies and improves in fitness and diet and, training regimens and all of that, players are now playing well into their late 30s. So I think 30 might be premature, but I understand what you're saying overall, the point you're trying to make. I think you mean for the national team that after 30, you should step. To me, it doesn't so much depend on your age. It depends on, are you still contributing? Look, if Tim Ream was still able to contribute at a good level and not clearly in decline, I would still want him there. It's just he hasn't, right? Let's be clear. Tim Ream at 35 in the World Cup was probably our best defender, right? So it just depends on what level you're playing at, right? So, but yeah, generally, I kind of see the point you're trying to make.
Unless he's talking about this camp specifically, because for the senior team, the age doesn't really matter. If the guy's like 40 and he's like our best center back, you bring him in, right? Sure. I think he's talking about this camp because when you're talking about the A team, it's not about the player's age. It's about just having the best players. If he's 40, if he's 20, if he's 18 or 35, it doesn't really matter. If he's our best player in that position, you bring him in.
Yeah. Surprise Poch didn't call Maxi Carrizo. He's Argentine. He doesn't want to call under 20 players or under 17 players for some reason. Chunky Chunks, thank you for the super chat. Steven Spada, Weah scored for Juve. Yes, he did. And a nice goal. A very nice goal. That is his 9th goal contribution on the season, which is very good for Weah. It's already his best ever season.
I want to address one thing for James Warden because then he might actually get our point. And it's a good question, actually. I don't know if he's asking in a snarky way. James Warden asked, how does this camp hurt I'd like you to address that honestly. Okay, that's perfect. And then you let me know what you think, James. How does it hurt? One, it becomes a waste. We already addressed that, right? Which you can take opportunity to give actual young players that in the future can contribute. Second, it's more about perception, right? We talked about how a player like Agyemang, whatever, he'll go and score against Venezuela, and that will be pushed by the media to shove these guys with the national team. And when you go back, and I did this in a video, when you go back, for example, to the 2021 Camp Cupcake, which was the last one before World Cup qualifying, Jesus Ferreira scored like a hat trick. Paul Riola had like 3 assists or something. What happened there was because they were so incredible against Trinidad's B team, that gives them a longer leash in the future. And I firmly believe that played a role for why we saw Berhalter persisting on those players that were clearly out of their depth with the national team in World Cup qualifying. It creates that false perception against very weak opponents. You're not being challenged. So it does actually hurt the national team over the long run if the coach is an imbecile, which I don't think Pochettino is. But if it doesn't hurt because the coach sees that, it just becomes a waste of time. And any waste of time hurts you, right? You don't want to waste your time with stupid shit. You can just use that time to be useful. But it's the perception.
It's also an opportunity cost. The opportunity with this camp is to take a look at our high ceiling young players and get them working with Poch early so that when they're ready for a full senior team camp, they're already comfortable with Poch. They're already comfortable with the expectations that Pochettino has of this team, and they can come into the camp already with that and a little bit more integrated, right? It is an opportunity cost. And then there's the more ephemeral costs, which you may agree or you may disagree. But in my opinion, handing out caps to 30-year-olds who are terrible, terrible, terrible players who don't deserve it cheapens what it means to play for the national team. And here's another thing. Let's say you're an Inter Miami fan and you go to this game. I mean, let's say you've never watched the national team before and you live in Miami and maybe you became an Inter Miami fan because you like Messi. And now you go and you watch a national team game and you think, this is the U.S. men's national team. And you watch that. Let's be honest. Are you ever coming back? No, you're not. So
Probably
there are
not.
lots and lots of reasons that this camp is harmful. And that's why we think it is being misused. It doesn't have to be misused. It can be used well, right? But it is harmful for multiple reasons.
Pete, to add to that, not just the people that go to the game, this game was on TNT. So sometimes someone at home, and they're selling it to the people as a U.S. men's national team game at home. So once you sit down, it's like, okay, this is the U.S. men's national team. Let's see what this is about. And then you see these players that are very mediocre, not good. It becomes a bit complicated, right? Now, that's why we were saying, if you sell it to the audience and to everyone saying, this is a next generation, it's a U20 game.
Yeah.
When people are watching it, you're going to be much more patient with U20 players and you know what it's about. It's not because it sucks to sell this as the U.S. men's national team. Because let's be real, we can all agree this is not really the U.S. men's national team, right? It's a team composed of American players, but it's not really the U.S. men's national team.
Well, it's like Chris says here. I was thinking about my family members who love going to sports games. They wouldn't have any clue that this wasn't the A team. Exactly. So it is harmful for lots of reasons. There isn't a ton more to say without us repeating ourselves. We will cover the Costa Rica game on Tuesday, as we usually do, and then we're going to move on from this camp, thank God, because it really has very little bearing on our national team future.
I mean,
any last
just
words,
one thing, Pete. Yeah, one last word. If you guys think that our criticism of the camp is taking away your joy from it, just don't watch us during the camp. But this camp, we're not going to be very positive about it because there's not much to be positive about. We'll be positive of March. There's a lot to be positive about for the March camp. There's a lot to be positive about the Americans abroad. You guys are seeing our coverage. There's a lot of good things happening with the Americans abroad. But this camp, if you want to just sit back and enjoy it and don't want to be critical of it, it's just not what we're going to do. We're not going to sit back and be complacent with you're not going to just accept it.
There are lots of media channels that will happily tell you how wonderful this is and what a great opportunity now Patrick Agyemang could be the striker of the future. He's going to be at the World Cup. They will tell you a lot of things that are frankly not true. But if that's what you want to hear, by all means, go for it. We're telling you what we really think. And this is, of course, just our opinion. You're welcome to disagree with us. But go for it. Isaiah, thank you so much for the super chat. Anything else, Tack?
No, I think I'm looking much more forward to covering the Americans abroad than this camp. And
Yeah, I will still have the top 10 tomorrow, by the way.
yeah, and I have the abroad on Monday. We'll cover the game Wednesday night, um, but again, we said what we had to say about this, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the stream or the game or something. But what truly matters is March.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. Oh, last one here. You guys think Pax will replace Tillman in March? It's possible. We have to see what Poch does. He already has Gio's back, right? So he might think I have Gio and I have Aronson and I have McKennie who can play there. So he may not bring Paxton. But I think obviously Paxton has a higher chance now if Tillman is injured. So let's just wait and see. All right, guys. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon.